Today I want to share 3 crowd-pleasing recipes for a summer barbecue. We'll start with the classic Char Siu or Chinese BBQ pork. If you're new to Char Siu, it's an extremely juicy, sweet, and savory pork dish. And it's a popular entree on its own, and a pleasant addition to many different types of noodles, rice dishes, and pastries like Char Siu bao. By my estimates, my dad has made Char Siu at least 10,000 times over his 50 years as a Chinese chef. So I'm really excited to document his recipe, to share it with you, and to pass it on to our kids one day.
朋友們，大家好啊！今日同大家介紹一個呢，就係我哋屋企平時做呢個叉燒。
Char Siu originally comes from Cantonese cuisine, and the word Char Siu literally means fork roasted, which is a nod to the traditional cooking method of skewering seasoned pork with long forks and placing them in an oven or over a fire. Although it's considered a Chinese dish, many other Asian cuisines have integrated Char Siu into their own dishes like Char Siu rice all across Southeast Asia or ramen in Japan. In ancient times, Char Siu used to be made with wild boar or other available meats, but nowadays it's almost always made with a fatty cut of pork.
我哋選個呢，就係個豬個膊頭肉，我哋中國人叫做梅頭肉，就係個豬個膊頭嘅部位。買翻嚟呢嘅時候呢，一大嚿有啲成5、6磅啊，咁樣6、7磅都有嘅。咁我買翻嚟嘅時候呢，改好晒㗎啦。嗱，切嘅時候呢，順住咁一條條咁樣，唔好打橫咁切嚇，知唔知嘛？咁切落嚟呢，一條大概係差唔多1英寸上下嘅咧，1英寸上下咁上下就得㗎啦。你睇就係咁大塊咁成條嘅嚇。
We got a ton of questions about the best cuts of meat to use from our Patreon community and Instagram followers. My dad uses pork butt, also known as Boston butt or pork shoulder, and this seems to be among the most popular cuts for Char Siu. It's ideal to use more fatty cuts, so some other options would be the pork neck end or pork belly.
我哋咧在醃佢之前咧，醃肉之前咧，我哋先用呢個叉就篤佢，佢啲醃嘅時候咧，佢啲味咧就容易啲吸收入去啲肉嗰度嚇。啊，咁樣篤埋啲佢嚇。嗱，咁容易吸收啲肉啊。
My dad is spending about 2 minutes poking the meat.
篤好晒啦，嗱，大家睇到嘛？個肉咧係一條條咁落嚟，都紋一條條嘅係嘛？一格有啲肥嘅手咁隔住喺度嚇，睇到嚇？記住啦，又順住咁切，唔好打橫切嚇。好啦，將啲肉已經處理好晒喺度啦。嗱
Next, we'll start preparing our marinade for the pork. For 2 pounds of meat, we'll add 1 tablespoon of garlic salt, 4 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce, 2 tablespoons of light soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of hoisin sauce, 2 tablespoons of red wine, 1 tablespoon of Shaoxing wine, 1 cube of fermented bean curd, and 1 teaspoon of 5 spice powder.
我今日特別係試係用一個紅酒嚟嘅，紅酒我只係可以咁樣講，紅酒我就想佢嗰個紅色個 colour 多啲，嗱就唔會咁黑啊！呢個白酒咧，嗱大家睇到我係有啲檸檬喺入邊嘅嗬，有檸檬喺度。一買翻嚟嘅時候，我就切啲檸檬入嚟啦。啊，點解？我中意佢啲檸檬嘅味，醃料嘅時候、煮嘢嘅時候會香啲。我自己就係咁做噶啦。仲有一樣，我俾一嚿南乳落去，醃起嚟佢香味係比較特別啲嘅。同埋南乳佢本身有啲紅色會增加個嚿肉顏色。如果你屋企冇南乳嘅，亦都唔需要俾。我先就俾一嚿南乳上去。咁樣咧，基本咧呢個醃料已經俾齊啦，菠蘿俾齊，將個南乳撳用佢先嚇。
We have all of these ingredients listed on our blog at madewithlao.com, along with step-by-step instructions and video clips to guide you as you make the recipe at home.
我呢個咧就係唔用紅色素嘅，如果你想用㗎就俾咯，唔想用咁咪唔好俾咯。我屋企我就唔用嗰啲紅色素啦。嗱，
平時係咪餐館用紅色水啊？
係啊，餐館啊嗰啲出邊啲就用紅色水，佢將個顏色比較鮮紅啲咁嘅意思啫嘛。屋企咧，我諗唔需要咯。我哋平時屋企都唔用。
If you're committed to getting that vibrant red exterior, a lot of traditional recipes will use ingredients like red fermented bean curd or red yeast rice powder. An easy alternative is just to use red food coloring, which doesn't affect the taste. For almost all of our recipes, we film everything twice just to have more camera angles. So for this one, we made a batch with half a teaspoon of red food coloring and a batch without it. For comparison, you can see what both versions look like after they've been cooked and chopped. They both taste the exact same, which is to say, they are absolutely amazing.
嗱，嘢我哋已經俾齊晒啦，嗱。好啊，呢個味。好，調味料就搞，呢個醬就搞好咗啦。哇，開始醃肉啦嗱。
Place the meat into a Ziploc bag, pour the sauce in, and massage the pork for about 2 minutes so that the sauce is able to finesse its way into the meat. Afterwards, we'll push all the air out of it and seal it.
嗱，最好咧就要6至8個鐘以上啦。有啲好多人擺過夜嘅，你最好唔好超過24個鐘頭，頂籠就24個鐘頭就最好噶啦。你超過24個鐘頭就已經係啲肉會實咗，你知嘛？8個鐘，通常我8個鐘足夠，我認為8個鐘就足夠啦。啲扣肉唔係大嚿啊嘛，都唔夠1寸，係嘛？得㗎啦。如果你想個快啲嘅，撳一撳咧，都按摩下佢，即係按摩下嚿肉，佢將佢快啲吸收。另外一個問題，如果你係今晚想食嘅咧，朝早醃咗佢，晚黑你唔使擺入雪櫃啦，就咁擺出邊得㗎啦，就咁飲喺佢得㗎。嗱，佢唔會變嘅壞嘅，因為佢再嗰啲汁啊咁包住佢，佢唔會嚿肉唔會變壞。仲有一個問題又，如果你想喺雪櫃拎出嚟即刻就唔好啦，就等佢擺喺出邊，喺雪櫃拎出嚟之後咧，擺佢1個鐘頭到咁上下，得個肉同出邊嘅室溫相同，唔好太凍，太凍咧擺入雪櫃，擺入佢個肉就冇咁好用啦，知道嘛？有雪櫃攞出嚟一定要擺勻佢，好似室溫一樣。好啦，咁就搞掂晒啦，醃好晒啦。
Next, we'll prepare our pork for the oven. To make Char Siu, you'll need a few things: a baking pan, a baking rack, tongs, and aluminum foil. This is optional, but you might also want to use a meat thermometer that allows you to monitor the internal temperature of the pork as it's cooking. My dad literally chuckled at me when I asked him about this and said, "We don't cook this way." But since I haven't yet acquired my dad's intuition in the kitchen, I like to use these whenever I cook big pieces of meat. The last thing we'll do before placing our tray in the oven is to add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of water to the pan. This helps to generate a bit of steam to help the pork stay moist, and it also helps to prevent the drippings from burning and smoking. Earlier, we started preheating our oven at 425 degrees Fahrenheit or 218 degrees Celsius. Now we'll be placing our pork into the oven and taking it out periodically to lather it again with either our leftover pork marinade or 2 tablespoons of honey diluted with about 2 teaspoons of water. Here's how my dad split up the cooking time. We'll cook for 15 minutes and lather both sides with the pork marinade. Cook for another 15 minutes and lather both sides with the pork marinade again. Cook for 10 minutes and lather both sides with the diluted honey. And finally, we'll turn up the heat to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Cook for another 5 minutes, lather both sides with honey, and let it cool for a few minutes before cutting into it. In total, this was about 50 minutes in the oven.
知唔知餐館同呢個方法點唔同啊？
餐館做嘅咧，佢係一次會做好多，所以佢同我哋咁嘅做法又唔同嘅。佢一次咧，佢係用個大嘅桶，5個 gallon 個大嘅桶嚟裝。嗰一次嘅sauce佢用好多次，做好多次嘅，所以我同我哋唔同法。佢當餐館咧，紅水啊、糖啊、酒啊、生抽啊，冇我哋咁多嘢，又好多嘢嘅俾落去嘅。
邊個好食啲啊？
我覺得係我哋自己做嘅，用嘅材料係多啲，好啲。
點樣整到出邊有光啊？
糖，最收尾嘅時候佢一定好似我糖漿，佢唔一定係用蜜糖。佢餐館用嘅咧，佢係用啲糖漿咁樣，啲糖漿咁。最尾嘅時候搽上去喺面上嗰度，明白嘛？咁佢咪光啲咯。
點煮所以入邊咪冇咁乾啊？
要睇啲肉，如果你係用呢個係豬嘅膊頭肉，我哋個叫做梅頭肉咧，佢就如果你唔係焗嘅時間太長嘅話，佢唔會乾嘅。好似
呢而家係2磅肉。如果係1磅肉咧，咁咪個時間唔點唔同。
時間一樣，你一嚿肉都係咁樣，2嚿肉都係咁啫嘛。就只不過你係用嗰啲醃料係嘅份量落少啲咁啫嘛。 等佢再起多啲椒，等佢再多啲椒再搽少少糖面上咁好靚啦。你知唔知出邊賣嗰啲叉燒好似好靚好靚咁，超嗰叉燒成乾囊啲叉浸出落嗰啲糖水度，佢咁樣佢又想啲叉燒重啲。
重啲啊！哦，
係啊！佢燒個叉燒成梳咁擺落個糖呢個糖嘅盤浸住佢，浸過晒啲糖，浸完糖先流起嘅勁乾晒啲糖。佢又重啲，
會貴啲啊？
咪做啲錢。如果你咁拎出嚟，佢做生意係咁啦。佢擺落個糖盤浸住佢，咁咪索包啲糖好重噶嘛，你知道嘛？我上嚟再搽啲糖上去就好靚噶啦，咁啊個面就好靚啊！你個蜜汁叉燒你知道？嗯。OK， 噔噔噔噔，睇下，噔噔噔噔，噔噔噔噔。哦。噔噔噔噔，係咪？嗯。OK， 出啲糖上去，係嘛？嗯。好靚。趁佢熱嘅時候咧，搽啲糖上去，啲蜜糖嚟噶嘛，反轉佢，咁啊靚啊，靚唔靚啊？
嗯，肚餓啊！
肚餓啊 ？OK，好啦，我而家拎佢出嚟嗬，係咁啦。嗱，最好咧就唔好即刻切佢，等多5分鐘咁上下再切。嗱，咁呢個收啲肉汁先至再切佢。而家仲太熱，我而家咧睇下咩叫做熟嚇。切啲出嚟俾大家睇下先嚇，睇到嘛？嗯。
Oh my god！
正唔正？正唔正？你食呢個最正。
OK。Oh, so juicy. 你試下。
Next, my dad will teach us how to put together a salt and pepper classic.
椒鹽豬扒
Salt and pepper pork chops, a dish my dad has made thousands of times.
Hello， 朋友們，大家好啊！今日同大家介紹呢個呢椒鹽豬扒。椒鹽豬扒就好簡單配料嘅啫，係1磅多啲嘅豬肉，青椒少少，紅辣椒少少，辣椒、蒜頭、葱，係咁多嘢啦。
Salt and pepper pork chops are just one of the wildly popular salt and pepper style dishes in Cantonese cuisine. There are countless other proteins you can cook in this style, such as squid, fish, chicken, and tofu, to name a few. Browse through a couple recipes online and you'll see that the seasonings can also vary based on your particular preferences, with some recipes featuring 5-spice, Sichuan peppercorns, black pepper, or jalapenos. Despite all the variety, these dishes all share in the wonderful combination of spicy, salty flavor and crispy yet tender texture in each bite.
我哋而家呢就先切咗啲配料先啊嗱。
We'll only use 1/5 of a red bell pepper here. First, we'll cut it into strips. Then rotate to dice.
呢個就青椒。
We'll dice the green bell pepper the same way.
個葱。
We'll dice 1 scallion.
蒜頭2粒。拍碎佢。
Then we'll peel, smash, and mince 2 garlic cloves.
嗱，紅椒仔，我俾半隻就夠啦，好辣嘅呢啲。如果你想食得辣啲嘅，就俾多啲。自己種嘅呢啲，喺出面摘出嚟。
Addison from Patreon asks, what other chilies are great substitutes?
Some chili is really spicy. Some chili is less spicy. You can choose whatever you want. Or you don't have to add chili. The material for the seasoning for the pork chop is already have a pepper.
Yeah.
The white pepper made this dish have a flavor. So chili also bring more extra. So you don't have to add chili, but you can.
呢個主角嚟㗎啦，我哋咧先切咗佢先啊！嗱，睇下佢啲紋喺度啊嘛。我哋咁樣一塊塊咁整開佢，呢啲根唔好要啦。嗱，呢啲咧呢度分開佢。
Ho Ling from Patreon asked, what specific cuts are best for this dish?
pork chop 都得，pork chop 都 OK。
What is it?
呢個係好啲。
Okay, something cute. My mom makes these sheets for us every time. She asks Dad, and she painfully writes down all the ingredients.
Okay.
This will be the original cookbook. Just copies of that.
Different part of the pig have a different kind of pork chop. This one I like the pretty much most. It's called
Pork loin sirloin chop.
yeah. In Chinese is 里脊脊肉上腰肉塊. This is the pig, right? So this is the part of the pig. So this is the hair of the pig. This part is close to the butt leg, the top part of the butt leg. For family cooking without the bone is easier because when you cut the pork chop very thin, it's hard with the bone. So actually you can cook with the bone and no bone pork chop.
This time you use no bone.
Yeah, this time we prefer no bone. Easier for our audience
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
一塊夠咁樣切咗佢先，片開佢2塊嗱。
After cutting the pork to your desired size, we'll turn the knife sideways to halve the pieces to around a 1/4 inch thick.
好啦，仲要咩咧？你仲要拍一拍佢喎，俾佢刀背咁，
How do you prevent the pork from getting too tough?
俾佢刀背咁得，咁咪啲肉咪鬆咯，鬆咗之後佢咪唔會實咯。嗱，你中意大嚿啲嘅，好似呢嚿咁切開佢嗱，睇住嚟喺中間嗰度。 唔好，一樣，即係佢一樣係咁薄噶嘛。
仲有咩椒鹽啊，爹哋？椒鹽魚、椒鹽
椒鹽
蝦，
咩得啦？
有冇椒鹽牛肉？
你中意椒鹽牛唔椒鹽牛肉隨意啫嘛，椒鹽我得啦，你咪整我嚟再炸咗我嚟整椒鹽咯。
No, we cannot do it.
Grandpa's got jokes, huh?
That's
好
funny.
啦，肉就切好啦。我哋而家咧係較呢個汁，醃一醃嗰啲豬扒先嚇。
For the pork marinade, we'll mix 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, a little bit less than a half teaspoon of baking soda, 1 tablespoon of cooking wine, 1 tablespoon of oyster sauce, 1 tablespoon of light soy sauce, and 1 tablespoon of water. We'll give it a quick mix and then add 1 teaspoon of sugar and a half teaspoon of salt.
好啦，而家咧就俾啲肉落去撈啦嗱。
We'll mix the pork in with the marinade by hand for about 1 minute.
又俾多個湯匙嘅水落去先，唔夠水，即係2個湯匙水。你唔夠水，啲肉發唔起，知道嘛？嗱，而家好啦，應該咧炸開佢就好靚噶啦，但係最好就有1個鐘頭咁上下啦，啲肉先至吸晒嗰啲汁水入去。
After 30 to 60 minutes of letting the pork marinate, we're ready to cook.
嗱，我哋而家正式開始炸下，開火。我哋而家用粟米油，用2杯嘅油上去啦。 啲油炸完咗仲可以食得係用得到嘅，我嚟煮嘢食嘅。
The reason we're using corn oil here instead of something like olive oil is because olive oil has what is called a lower smoke point, which is the temperature at which the oil starts shimmering or rippling and starts smoking or burning. Smoking oil isn't always a problem and sometimes even desired for getting that perfect wok hei in your stir fry, but it's a sign that the oil is breaking down, which can release burnt or bitter flavors or even harmful free radicals. Here's a chart that highlights the smoke points of a few of the most common cooking oils. There are a few other factors that go into selecting oils, like whether they're neutral or flavored, or refined or unrefined. Most cooking oil is created by extracting and compressing seeds and nuts, and oils that are unrefined, raw, or virgin are usually bottled almost immediately. They generally have more nutrients, but a lower smoke point and shorter shelf life. Refined oils go through more processing for a higher smoke point, a longer shelf life, and a more neutral flavor. For simplicity's sake, for frying, you generally want to use neutral refined oils like vegetable oil, refined olive oil, or corn oil.
好啦，而家咧未夠熱嘅時候咧，俾隻蛋落去撈嗰啲豬扒先。
While the oil heats up, we'll add half a beaten egg into the marinated pork.
而家撈勻咗先嚇。蛋有咩作用？等啲蛋碎索啲乾粉，成炸起上嚟咧，嚿肉咧會脆啲嘅。
After the egg is thoroughly mixed in, we'll put 3 tablespoons of cornstarch on a large plate, which we'll use to coat the pork before frying. As an overview, we'll be frying the pork twice. First, in batches at around 380 degrees Fahrenheit for about 1.5 minutes to cook the pork. Then, a second time, but all together, at around 450 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 seconds to make the outside coating more crispy.
點知道嗰啲油夠嘅溫度夠高啦嚇？你俾一個濕嘅嘢落去，佢馬上就炸得先係咪？ 即係話證明啲油會夠溫啦。而家仲可以話真係太熱啦，會加多唔多凍嘅油上去。
To cool down the oil a bit, my dad adds 2 more tablespoons of room temperature oil to the pot.
好啦，而家咧就開始咧攬啲粉先去炸下。
We'll coat each piece of pork with cornstarch before dropping it into the oil to fry.
而家俾嘢落去啦，而家就可以炸開翻熱啦，唔使咁猛。
中火。
We'll drop them in one at a time, carefully, and fry them in batches to not overcrowd the pot. We'll fry the pork until the outside crust is a light golden brown, or about 1.5 minutes.
就要較起㗎啦。
係黃色係熟㗎。
係啊，黃色就已經係熟㗎啦。
而家係380度。
係啊，好，即係停一停油，等陣再燒熱佢油咧，再俾翻落個翻炸翻佢。第一次咧炸嘅時候咧，佢啲水分咧就吸晒喺粉喺面上嗰度。第二次炸嘅時候咧，喺個咩表皮上嗰啲汁咧，嗰啲肉汁咧就揾乾水佢，咁咧個肉就香啦，就脆啦。
因為你唔係一直擺晒落去，你點樣記得？
睇到㗎嘛，一直擺落去之後白色，炸好嗰啲咪黃色啦嘛。我睇啦嘛。
Belinda from Patreon asks, how do you keep the kitchen clean while frying?
Oh, that's a good question.
Okay.
炸嘢冇可能整到好乾淨，炸完馬上抹翻乾淨嘅咯。
Some of the people, they will open the door, let the air circulate very well, go out very fast. And some people like a deep fry in the garage or outside the yard. So that way the smoke or the oily smell will go out very quick. So you don't have to clean the stove area. You save a lot of time.
好，再燒翻熱嘅，就之後咧倒佢落去翻炸。
開猛火啊！
開猛火，等啲油燒翻滾啲啊嘛。
450度。
After the oil's hot again, we'll fry all the pork together for a second time for about 30 seconds to get the outside extra crispy.
A lot of people ask, including Nancy from Patreon, how do you keep the meat tender and the crust crispy and the meat juicy as well?
炸2次嘅時候佢咪脆咯，但係你脆嘅時候你又快脆啲食，就覺得佢脆咗喎。你擺耐咗佢就唔脆啦。
So for the juiciness, just like Daddy say, when you marinate the meat, so all those juice is absorbed inside the meat, and then you put the egg outside the meat, it kind of lock the juice inside. So that way we keep the meat really juicy.
好啦，而家就炸好咗啦。
Now to put the dish together, we'll heat up a wok on medium heat. While we wait, we'll mix together 1 tablespoon of garlic salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper. If you've never heard of white pepper, it's a spice that's ground up from white peppercorns. Fun fact, black and white pepper actually both come from a fruit. The same fruit, to be exact. White peppercorns, black peppercorns, green peppercorns, red peppercorns. These are all the same berry from the same pepper plant, Piper nigrum. The main difference is when and how they're harvested and processed. Black peppercorns are dried as soon as they're picked, and their skin becomes black and shriveled. White peppercorns are soaked for at least a week, which allows the outer skin to decompose. This leaves just the seed to be dried with its distinctive heat and concentrated spiciness. As you'll see in my dad's recipe, even a 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper in a seasoning is enough for a flavorful and spicy kick of heat. Now when the wok is hot, we'll add about a teaspoon of the oil we just used.
啲蒜頭、紅辣椒仔，攞咗蒜頭先，青紅椒俾咗落去。
After stir-frying the garlic and bell peppers for about 30 seconds on high, we'll add the scallions followed by all of the pork. After tossing the pork in with the aromatics for about 30 seconds, we'll add our seasoning.
好啦，俾埋嗰啲蒜子鹽，
唔係一直倒晒啊！
咁你咪唔撈唔勻咯，俾晒落去咪。
After adding in our seasoning, we'll cook for another 15 to 20 seconds before turning off the heat.
好啦，閂火。
We'll continue to mix for another 20 to 30 seconds until the seasoning is evenly coating the pork. Then we can plate it.
Yeah? 唔會鹹得咋？入邊仍軟滑，出邊就脆啦嘛。哦， OK， 好啦，朋友們，呢個椒鹽豬扒就好咗啦，希望大家中意。紅隊食飯，謝謝爺爺。乖。
Thank you.
Cheers!
Cheers.
Good, huh?
I love that.
You love that.
It
right?
doesn't even taste like pork.
When I go to the restaurant, someone will ask me, okay, you can order your favorite dish. In my mind, I will pack up this dish.
Really? I thought you didn't.
With pork?
Yeah, pork.
Oh, you
Wow.
It's one of my really favorite
Yeah.
dish I eat in the restaurant.
Wow.
And Daddy say, why you always order that? I like this because just made me have such good appetite.
Okay, what's your favorite?
你最中意食乜嘢？椒鹽乜嘢
我冇乜所謂，我乜都食。
？For me，椒鹽 squeeze。
Yeah.
Ah.
I love smoke. I love smoke.
咁都係。
That's my favorite.
Oh.
Yo!
I am my
Yeah.
mother's son. Do you like
Yeah.
friends good too?
Yeah, that's good. Right now I'm craving it with fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want it with like a thin fish, so crispy.
Dang, we gotta do both of them.
I do it as do a seafood night.
Finally, my dad will show us an easy way to prepare classic barbecue meat.
焗排骨。
Chinese BBQ Spare Ribs, a dish my dad has made hundreds of times.
Hello，朋友們，大家好啊！我哋又見面啦。今日同大家介紹呢個呢，就係燒排骨。我哋而家呢個排骨呢，就係3磅咁上下，呢塊排骨喺 Costco 買㗎啦。
As my dad mentioned, the name of this dish is Siu Paikwat. Siu literally means roasted, and just like Char Siu or Siu Yok, Siu Paikwat belongs to the epic family of Siu Mei, which are Cantonese-style roasted meats. Traditionally, these meats were painstakingly roasted on spits and open fires, but nowadays, it's impossible to walk through a Chinatown without running into a Chinese barbecue shop with dozens of delicious roasted meats hanging by the window.
我哋先呢，將啲排骨個後嗰邊呢，我哋蒸佢一嚿嚿，一條排骨就係排骨咁整開佢。嗱，咁整開佢呢，就容易入味同埋容易熟啲。整開之後呢，我哋用啲調檔紙嚟收拾佢嚟，咁呢，佢就會容易入味啲嚇。
James from Patreon asks, what is the right cut of meat to use?
有啲咧就起得好乾淨啲肉，有啲就留翻多啲肉喺度。嗱，如果燒咧就攞去闊啲嘅。嗰條佢兩種排骨，有啲係窄啲嘅，好厚肉嘅；有啲係闊啲嘅，就冇咁厚肉嘅。
咁應該係用厚肉窄啲。
隨你冇乜所謂，
But for me,
冇所謂啫，你隨你選擇。
more meat and also narrow one.
Yeah.
I don't like it too wide because it's hard to eat.
首先咧，用啲蒜椒鹽醃咗佢先，兩邊搽勻佢。我係用一個湯匙嘅蒜椒鹽反轉佢，一樣係咁樣燒散佢。特別呢啲呢啲整開呢度。
Is there anything you're looking for besides the size?
你成包買嘅佢擰下佢，睇下佢有冇咁多水咧，佢就新鮮啲啦。即係好多水度咧，佢已經擺咗好耐㗎啦。如果佢入邊啲排骨仲硬地嘅咧，嗰啲就入邊攞出嚟冇幾耐，佢就冇咁多水。嗱，咁醃過之後咧，睇下度先。好啦，我哋先校咗個醬啦。糖咧，佢用一個湯匙；鹽咧，用2個茶匙；胡椒粉，佢用1個茶匙；茄汁2湯匙。
中國餐係咪平時用茄汁啊？
唔係一定個個用茄汁，我就喜歡用茄汁。有啲人又喜歡用南乳咁我就簡單啲。酒2個湯匙，五香粉係半個茶匙。
For those of you unfamiliar with 5 spice powder, or mheng fun in Cantonese, it is an umbrella for the popular Chinese blend of spices that usually consist of cinnamon, fennel seeds, star anise, cloves, and peppers. The number 5 doesn't necessarily literally mean that it has 5 ingredients, as some blends use less spices and some blends use way more than 5 ingredients. 5 spice powder is actually a nod to the 5 traditional Chinese elements: earth, fire, water, wood, and metal. It's also a balancing act of the 5 traditional flavors of Chinese cuisine: salty, spicy, sour, sweet, and bitter.
通常咧自己食咧就唔一定話要落紅水落啊。不過我哋而家做緊呢個視頻，所以佢嘅效果係啲顏色靚啲，1/4個茶匙就夠啦。咁樣咧基本上就嘢就落齊晒啦。個醬就已經開好咗啦。嗱，我哋而家咧，我哋將佢擺喺個盤度。
盤係咪一定要用膠？
我要冚住佢啊嘛，所以啦，我哋而家就嚟醃呢個排骨啦，拆開佢得啦。嗰啲罅嗰度咧，呢邊咧整開呢邊咧就反轉佢，反轉佢之後咧再搽呢度。 唔使好多。熱好之後咧，就將呢個膠袋咁冚住佢，咁就得啦。啲餐館咧佢就醃過夜，今晚醃咗佢，聽日翻工翻嚟先至再燒。如果你屋企做，應該4個鐘頭就可以得噶啦。
可唔可以太耐？
唔好太時間太長，最多8個鐘頭就好啦。啲時間太長嘅話咧，佢變咗佢會呢個肉會實咗。咁樣如果你係當日朝早醃咗佢，晚黑翻嚟食噶啦，你又唔使擺雪櫃噶啦。喺雪櫃攞出嚟最好就事先擺出嚟，擺佢1個鐘頭到係先至再入爐焗。如果你係即刻拎出嚟的咧，咁就變咗就燒耐啲時間咯。嗱，我哋而家擺入雪櫃嚇。朋友，仲有一樣嘢話俾你聽下，有樣糖漿，你可以係用麥芽糖或者係蜜糖，用2個湯匙咧掃上喺嗰嚿排骨面上，咁你好食啲，靚啲啊！如果你完全冇呢2樣嘢，又點辦啊？最簡單嘅方法話俾你聽咧，2個湯匙嘅砂糖上去，2個湯匙水。
We're gonna microwave the mixture for 1 minute, stir it with a spoon, and then microwave it for another minute.
好啦，1分鐘完咗，你就攞佢出嚟，攪佢，再擺入俾入佢，喺佢呢度，再1分鐘。而家嗱黐住時間嘅，再凍咗之後咧，佢就會結㗎啦。
Even though my dad does it here, please be careful to not touch the glaze right away as it will be very hot.
嗰啲排骨就醃好啦，就準備而家擺入焗爐焗啊。
You'll need just a couple of things to cook the spare ribs in the oven. A baking pan, a baking rack, and aluminum foil. This is optional, but you might also want to use a meat thermometer that allows you to monitor the internal temperature of the pork as it's cooking. My dad has literally told me we don't cook this way, but since I haven't yet acquired my dad's intuition in the kitchen, I like to use these whenever I cook big pieces of meat.
首先咧，個盤咧就啲石子墊好之後咧，你又最好有鐵架，就晾一晾佢，擺落去啱啱好，因為佢底下有個鐵架晾住，咁佢又容易好多噶啦。而家咧將佢擺入焗爐，半個鐘頭咁上下咧就拎佢出嚟搽啲糖漿上去啦。我哋校到佢係400度。
Can you use foil when you're baking it?
包住佢就唔係話唔得，佢就慢啲熟咯。佢焗到佢面上起勢，好似我咁弄起燒咧，咁就俾石子包住佢就唔會啦，冇咁嘅效果啦。
I also wanted to make a special shout out to thank all of our wonderful Patreon supporters for helping bring this video to life. If you enjoy our videos and are interested in supporting us directly, head on over to patreon.com/madewithlau to learn more.
係啊，焗到而家咧，個排骨咧差唔多得㗎啦。而家我就拎佢出嚟。
After 35 minutes in the oven, we'll remove the ribs and brush your glaze of choice onto them. Adding a sugar-based glaze and throwing it back in the oven for more time is really important because it allows the sugar to caramelize under the heat and gives the ribs a nice sweet taste and charred texture.
How do you keep the meat juicy and tender?
猛火啲，即係燒到個爐有400度以上，先擺啲肉落去。咁佢嘅時候嗰啲猛火將嗰啲肉表面咪熟咗咯，快脆啲熟。快脆啲熟嘅時候咧，佢咪啲包住啲汁喺入邊。如果你慢慢開到慢火咁樣，慢慢咁啲汁咪流晒出嚟咯，咁咪乾咯，係嘛？糖漿就搽好咗啦，而家再俾翻落去，等佢燒到啲糖漿香啲係咪？
Finally, we'll put the ribs back in the oven for 10 more minutes.
排骨就焗好咗啦，總共用嘅時間係45分鐘啊！好啦，我而家拎佢出嚟，呢個排骨咧就焗好咗，就唔好即刻切嘅喎。太早切嘅時候，佢仲係熱嘅時候切，啲汁咪流晒出嚟咯。而家你等你10零分鐘啊，咁先切，咁啲汁咧就 keep 翻晒喺入邊嚿肉嗰度啦。好啦，而家就等一陣間先切落。燒排骨焗好啦，希望大家中意。好多人食排骨，搞掂。
Hong Joy says, "Where's mine?"
Cheers!
Cheers! Cheers!
燒排骨
Siu pai guat.
，baby，
Oh my god.
Is it good?
my，
So good.
I like a burnt end.
so good。
Cam, you want to try these? Put it right there.
That's the good stuff, bud. When was the first time you had ribs?
哦，都
When was the first time you had ribs, Cam?
係嘢。
Today.
Hey, is it first ribs?
Oh
I don't remember the year, but like a barbecue party 嘅 United States， 爹哋都係啦嗬，嚟到美國先有燒排骨食啦。
No，
爹哋食
廣州已經食啦，廣州大把嘢食啦。
Is this a popular dish in China?
廣州好流行嘅，廣東一個燒鵝、燒鴨啊雞，好平常嘅啫。
Thank you for making it.
多謝你整喎。
Thanks, Cam. Woohoo!
Thank you.
Wow.
YouTube thinks you'll like this recipe next. Let's see if they're right.